Picture this. You find yourself in the heart of Renaissance Rome in the year 1502. The air in the Vatican is thick with roasted peacocks, spiced wine, and something else, the metallic taste of power. A wedding is about to take place. A union not of love, but of survival and politics. The bride is Lucrezia Borgia, 22, daughter of the infamous Pope Alexander VI. Those silk drapes shimmer and banquet tables groan under the feast. Everyone knows this marriage is more than a ceremony. By the night's end, the celebration will turn into a grotesque spectacle. Her privacy will vanish. Her body will become proof. Her most intimate moment will be weaponized, not for herself, but for the ambitions of others. This is the story of how Lucrezia Borgia was forced into humiliation, and how she turned it into the ultimate power. And to understand why, we first need to step into the dangerous world she was born into. Renaissance Italy was not the romantic, candlelit age of chivalry we often imagine. It was a battlefield of city-states: Venice, Milan, Florence, Naples, each clawing for dominance in a never-ending game of betrayal. Alliances were sealed with ink one day and broken with daggers the next. At the center of this dangerous web sat the papacy. On paper, the Pope was God's representative on earth. In reality, the papal throne was just another prize in Italy's blood-soaked chessboard. No family played the game more ruthlessly than the Borgias. Pope Alexander VI, Lucretius, father, ruled with ambition that shocked even his rivals. His son, Cesare Borgia, was infamous for his cunning and cruelty. Poisonings, staged assassinations, and backroom deals were their tools of choice. Together, they turned their daughter into a weapon, marrying her off whenever a new alliance was needed, and discarding her husbands as easily as one removes a chess piece from the board. For Lucrezia, there was no childhood of innocence. From the moment she was old enough to wear silk gowns, she was a bargaining chip, her life dictated by the shifting tides of power and survival. But even in this ruthless world, some losses cut deeper than others, and Lucrezia had already faced them. By the time Lucrezia Borgia stood in her wedding gown in 1502, she was no naive bride. She had already lived through 2 marriages that revealed just how merciless her family could be. Her first husband was Giovanni Sforza, chosen purely for political convenience. When his usefulness expired, the Borgias didn't simply annul the marriage, they destroyed him. Giovanni was publicly declared impotent, a humiliating accusation that ended the union and shredded his reputation. The truth behind the claim didn't matter. What mattered was that Lucrezia was free to be married off again, and her family had secured the outcome they wanted. Her second marriage was different. This time, her groom was Alfonso of Aragon, young man Lucrezia reportedly loved. But love carried no weight in a family that thrived on power. Alfonso became a liability. One night, he was ambushed and stabbed. Against the odds, he survived the attack, only to later be strangled to death on the steps of the Vatican itself. Whispers across Rome pointed to her own brother Cesare as the one who ordered the killing. The message was clear. Husbands were not companions in the Borgia household. They were expendable. Lucrezia learned that even the most personal bonds could be severed without warning if power demanded it. And yet, despite these losses, she would face a challenge far more grotesque in Ferrara. In 1502, Lucrezia was bound for Ferrara, one of the most powerful duchies in northern Italy. Her new husband, Alfonso d'Este, came from an ancient and respected family, one that looked at the Borgias with deep suspicion. To the Este clan, the Borgias were new money, drenched in scandal, and infamous for betrayal. If their heir was to marry Lucrezia, they wanted absolute certainty that the union was both legitimate and binding. And so they made a demand that would horrify us today. The marriage had to be consummated in public. No whispered doubts. No convenient annulments later. The Este family wanted proof undeniable. Physical proof that their son could produce heirs, and that Lucrezia was capable of bearing them. After hours of feasting and music, the bride and groom were guided into a staged bedroom, its curtains parted just enough for witnesses to observe. Este envoys and papal clerics stood nearby, eyes half averted but intent on recording every detail. The act was not about intimacy, it was ceremony. A grotesque theater of flesh performed for politics. To erase any possible doubt, it was repeated twice more. By dawn, whispers of what had taken place were already spreading through Italy. Ferrara had its guarantee. The Borgias had secured their alliance, and Lucrezia, once again, had been reduced to nothing more than a pawn. Yet what was intended as her ultimate humiliation would soon become the very weapon that would define her. Across Italy, nobles and courtiers traded the scandalous story. Lucrezia Borgia had been forced to prove her marriage in front of witnesses. To many, it was grotesque, even barbaric. But for Lucrezia, it became something else entirely: leverage. In a society where reputation meant survival, she now carried something no enemy could strip away: undeniable proof of her fertility and the legitimacy of her marriage. The very act meant to degrade her had become her shield. No one could question her position as Duchess of Ferrara. No rival could whisper about her being barren, and no schemer could attempt to annul her union.
Ow.
Her body had been turned into a ledger, and on that ledger, her place in the S dynasty was permanently inscribed. Instead of shrinking from the gossip, Lucrezia leaned into it. She endured the humiliation and came out unbroken, which in itself was a message. If she could survive that kind of spectacle, what else might she be capable of surviving? What else might she be capable of controlling? And once she realized this, she began to reinvent herself not as a pawn, but as a player. When Lucrezia entered Ferrara, many expected her to remain nothing more than a tainted Borgia dottora, symbol of scandal who could never escape her family's shadow. But what followed shocked everyone. She dazzled the court not with rebellion, but with refinement. Her beauty, her wit, and her charm soon became her strongest weapons. Rather than allowing herself to be defined by whispers of the marriage bed, she redirected attention to the brilliance of her mind. She hosted salons gatherings, where philosophers debated, poets recited, and artists unveiled their latest works. In these spaces, she was no longer an object of gossip. She was the director of the stage, setting the tone, guiding the conversation, and deciding which voices were amplified. Slowly the rumors shifted. Those who once mocked her as a pawn of the Borgias began to see her as something more: a woman of elegance, a duchess capable of embodying the refinement of Ferrara.
Oh.
She commissioned art, funded convents, and strategically aligned herself with the church, carefully laundering her reputation until she became a figure admired for piety as much as culture. Every act was deliberate, every gesture calculated. The same woman whose body had been turned into a public guarantee now turned culture into her own theater of power. And when her husband went off to war, leaving the duchy vulnerable, Lucrezia stepped into a role no one thought she could claim. When Alfonso d'Este left Ferrara to fight in Italy's endless wars, the duchy needed leadership. To the surprise of many, it was Lucrezia who stepped into that role. She was no longer just the daughter of a scandal-ridden pope or the bride humiliated on her wedding night. She became the ruler of Ferrara in her husband's absence. From her seat of power, she issued decrees, oversaw finances, and managed disputes with a level of authority that astonished the very nobles who once doubted her. What had begun as reluctant tolerance soon turned into respect. The people of Ferrara started to call her La Buona Duchessa, the good duchess. But scholars still debate what drove her. Was she a woman merely trying to survive in a hostile world, playing the role handed to her as best she could? Or was she something far more dangerous and ambitious strategist who saw every humiliation, every betrayal, as a lesson to sharpen her weapons? Her letters suggest a woman who was always measured, always careful. She never revealed too much, never allowed her true thoughts to slip into the public eye. This deliberate control only deepened the mystery. What is certain is that Lucrezia Borgia transformed. She evolved from pawn to power broker, from humiliated bride to a respected duchess whose rule shaped Ferrara for decades. And at the heart of her rise lay the very moment meant to degrade her. That wedding bed, witnessed by strangers, turned into the foundation of her throne. History remembers Lucrezia Borgia in whispers, poison, scandal, forbidden affairs. But behind the legends lies a truth far more fascinating. She was a survivor who learned to turn humiliation into power. The wedding night that should have destroyed her became the proof that cemented her position. The gossip that threatened to cage her was reshaped into a stage where she commanded attention. She mastered the dangerous art of perception. By dazzling courts with grace, wit, and culture, she rewrote her role from disposable pawn to respected duchess. And while her brother Cesare carved power with steel and blood, Lucrezia carved it with charm and strategy. Both weapons were deadly, but hers endured longer. The question still lingers. Was Lucretia a victim forced into the roles others wrote for her? Or was she quietly scripting her own ascent from the very beginning? Was she simply surviving? Or was she, in her own way, orchestrating? What can be denied is this. The bed that was meant to shame her became the cornerstone of her authority. And from that unlikely foundation, Lucrezia Borgia rose not as a symbol of scandal, but as one of the most underestimated strategists of the Renaissance.